What is the doctrine of equivalence? It is admittedly a topic that many find confusing, and that's a part of what is already a complicated, often analysis for patent infringement. So before we dive into the details, let's talk about policy. Maybe that will help give some context. Now, why do we have doctrine of equivalence? So doctrine of equivalence is this thing that we consider when the literal words of a patent claim don't all exist in the defendant's device or method. So in other words, sometimes the literal words of a patent may fail to capture unscrupulous copying by somebody who's trying to just avoid a little bit the literal words and still copy the invention. So in other words, we want substance to be elevated over form. So that's the big picture, substance over form, recognizing that it's sometimes hard to capture a new invention in just words. But on the other hand, if you don't follow exactly the literal words of a patent claim, that can yield uncertainty. How are companies and individuals supposed to properly avoid a patent if it can mean something that's not in the literal words? So what you see on the left, trying to protect the innovator against very small changes that are effectively the same, from balancing against the innovator's concerns with the rest of society not wanting to be burdened without proper notice of what is the invention. So that's the big picture. Now, you may be wondering, well, how are we supposed to do the analysis? So first of all, remember, doctrine of equivalence is not its own thing. I mean, it is a thing, but it is part of the regular infringement analysis. So when you are analyzing whether somebody infringes a claimed invention, say a product, you look to see if the defendant's product has each element of the claim. You're not looking to see if in general they're the same. You're looking at each element one by one. So generally, you always start with whether the defendant's thing literally has what is in each element. Only if it does not do you then analyze whether that element is met through the doctrine of equivalence. So in other words, if an invention has 5 elements, for each element you need to find in the defendant's product or process the element literally, exactly what the claim says, or by the doctrine of equivalence. So if you don't have the element literally, how do you analyze? Well, there's a 3-part test. You look at whether the different element, different than what is stated, is the same overall function, it's in the same way, and gets you the same result. You need all 3 things to be true for it to be equivalent. If that seems hard, that is absolutely correct. So just because the result is the same, if the function or the way is different, it is not equivalent. So if you look at the middle, these are supposed to be different ways. If, say, the yellow one was the way of the claimed invention, if you did either the blue or the red, it's not going to be equivalent. So it's really, really narrow situations where an element could be equivalent under the doctrine of equivalence. Now let's look at an example. Now we have a widget comprised of A, B, and C as the claimed invention. Does a widget having A, B, and X infringe? Not literally, because X is different than C. So you see how that works? It doesn't satisfy every element literally, assuming A, B, and C are elements. Now, what if we said if the widget was a light-emitting yo-yo, and you know both ABC and ABX are yo-yos that emit light? Is there infringement under the doctrine of equivalence? If you concluded yes, that's actually a premature conclusion, probably based on a wrong assumption. Remember that doctrine of equivalent is based on the analysis of individual elements of the claim, not the invention overall. So the real question is not whether the two widgets are overall the same. The real question is whether C and X are equivalent with the three-part test. In other words, do C and X function the same in the same way and get the same result? So only if all three things are true would you have equivalence. So if C and X both involve emitting light, but C is with a light bulb and X is with some fluorescence that was natural, that is a different way. And if the light wattage is the same, that might be the same result, but it's still a different way. So there would not be equivalence. There are other nuances to doctrine of equivalence, but hopefully that helps with the big picture.